this to me is why we are in this conversation together. Everyone tends to focus on the normal kind of tasky work that we have to do, the press releases, reviewing the publications, et cetera. And at CCA, we're an advocacy organization. I mean, we do transformative work with institutions and with states around implementing strategies, but at the core of our work, it's amplifying a core message. And we believe that communications and advocacy are underutilized in post-secondary transformation work. It's that landscape clearing that is absolutely critical to get everyone on the same page to do that work. That's how these strategies can shift mindsets, overcome these biases that exist, and create that urgency that we need for change. That really is CCA's mantra. And so this is what that conversation will be about. If you've seen some of our newer presentations, our conversation is always framed around students and American dreams and what they can do with a credential of purpose and value. The thing that we've been showing more recently is, all our work, everyone knows Complete College America, it's in our name. Our work has been around college completion. What we had not done a really great job of over the years is really show how all of these things are integrated. So our work in college completion is led by policy, perspectives, and practice. The Alliance is the fuel that makes that happen. All of it is within the confines of equity, but our larger social goal is like, why are you going to college? Why are we doing this work? And it's for economic opportunity, social mobility, and ultimately racial justice. And so I think anytime you connect with CCA's team, even some of our newer staff members, what you'll find is a dogmatic and absolute unapologetic commitment to working to solve problems that have been too far longstanding in higher education. And so we have a lot of team members who are practitioners. These aren't a bunch of necessarily policy wonks. You know what I'm saying? These are individuals who understand the role that policy plays in making an impact, but they're also practitioners who've done the work. So people who've worked at minority serving institutions and led student success and graduation efforts, worked in SHIO offices. These are the types of individuals who you are working with in the organization today. We talked about this quite a bit last year and in some of our earlier sessions. I talked about policy, practice, and perspectives. All these things have to work in concert with one another. The institutional transformation work is the practice, the perspectives, the kind of challenging assumptions and telling the story. That's the perspective work. And of course, you want to lock it all in with policy to make sure that we accelerate the change and remove any barriers that are taking place. And those of you who've been around for a minute know that, to me, this is the secret sauce of CCA. What we've been doing to kind of move the needle has really been around these 5 buckets: using data to drive the change, focusing on equitable outcomes, making sure that institutions are student ready and not the other way around, system-wide collaboration and implementation at scale is really the Alliance and where we go. The thing that might be a little new to some of you is how we've been talking about the game changers. That's the one thing everyone always knew CCA for, the game changers. And that work has evolved because, when you say guided pathways, you're not talking about one strategy. You're literally talking about 8 different, implementation strategies that make up guided pathways. And so the way that we've been talking about our strategies are more around pillars of transformation. How do we design the college student experience around some core buckets? Helping students make the choices at the beginning and purpose, aligning with workforce needs, structuring, those pathways that are well designed for students no matter where they enter, whether they're adult learners or otherwise, keeping them on that path through momentum, and then providing the support that they need. So you might see in here a little bit of bolder, or some strategies that are a little more bold. Those were the things that were previously the game changer strategies. Now you see it in a more comprehensive effort. And when we work with states, when we work with regions, we're helping them go through this kind of model of student success and implementation. And so we're always thinking about policy, perspective, and practice, but we're helping them identify the challenges, convene the right folks, get everyone on the same page around a shared vision, and then doing the work. So you might see some hashtags, CCA does the work. It's around helping people not just, say, here's something you need to do and walking away, but helping them create an action plan, implement it, refine it over years. And something else that I would say is not new to CCA, but has been core for us, has been the recognition that higher education has not always tracked the data very well. And so as a country, we've done pretty well at being able to identify access and completion goals, but we're still kind of iffy on progression, efficiency, and equity metrics, and still very behind the scenes and far behind on cost and post-college outcomes. And we've been working with a number of states in implementing the post-secondary data partnership. In your communications roles, we talk a lot about data, and I'm sure you've produced a lot of reports about what's going on. What we've been showing individuals now, here are the data metrics, and here's the alignment with the CCA strategies that you've been promoting over the past decade. And so for some individuals, it's been helpful for them to be able to start to tell these stories within a connection to strategies and the qualitative metrics that will tell us whether we're doing a good job or not. And so that is kind of the larger framework. And this slide allows me to pivot into, I think, the energy behind the work, which is the Alliance members. If you are new, and I know we've got a couple of very new people on the call, when we first started this work, our founding president said, we do a great job if we can get maybe 10 states to commit to college completion. We just announced today that South Carolina is the 39th state to join the CCA Alliance. And the Alliance includes a number of other institutional consortia and regions. So, states like California are not part of the Alliance as a whole, but you've got GIA and you've got the CVHEC, the Central Valley Higher Education Consortium, and kind of some of the institutions in Northern California. Same thing in New York. New York is not a part of the Alliance as a whole, but we're working directly with the CUNY system. And so our Alliance is continuing to grow. And all of that, I think, leads to the conversation that we want to lead into. And I'll just spend a couple of quick minutes in kind of finalizing a few things around what we expect around Alliance membership, and particularly around communications. These are things that we do. We do big campaigns with students, and 15 to Finish is something people know very well. We highlight individuals in your state that are doing good work and have invited them to be content experts and fellows. Those are the campaigns that I think are unique opportunities and ways that we can be partnering with you and your states and your sites more. Events and convenings, we've been literally in a pandemic for nearly 2 years. This is going to be an exciting 2022 for us because we're going to get back to some in-person events. And, we'll be bringing back that kind of fanfare of putting teams together and state teams, almost like a political rally. The exciting thing is that we're starting to think not just 1 year out, but a couple years out. So for communications leads, one of the big opportunities is that we are going to be thinking about where should our next annual convening be, not only next year, but the following couple of years. And so this could be a great opportunity for you to be able to showcase your region, your work, and bring and shine the light of the college completion movement on your geographic location. So we'd love to have that conversation with you. We are also having a really important conversation about potentially having a unique communications leads meeting where it will be funded by a philanthropy. And so we can have that conversation as well. Other big things that are taking place that you should know about: amplifying the voice of good work that's taking place. During the pandemic, we went all in on podcasts and webinars. Huge opportunities for you to have and showcase perception shifting conversations. Over the next year, you'll see us doing that with students more consistently, where we can talk about their experiences in the college completion movement. But you have a wealth of opportunities to be able to work with CCA and say, hey, we're really doing something great on this, or we have an institution that's really killing it in this area. Webinars, podcasts, those are going to be a lot of opportunities for you should you find them interesting and opportunistic. Everyone is probably familiar with the CompleteCollege.org website. We've made some changes to it. If you haven't been there in a while, I encourage you to log in. It looks a little different, a lot more focus on many of the things that I mentioned as far as our theory of change and intended impact. But I definitely encourage you to share this information with members of the Alliance, individuals, practitioners, faculty members, legislators, because a lot of the resources are questions that people always ask. How do I do this? Where's a resource that tells me this? Where's a policy brief or, or an article about this? A lot of that information is on the CCA site. And of course, we're continuing to amplify our work through social media. In the next, I would say, couple of months, what you'll get is a toolkit that highlights some of the major kind of like hashtags and that we're using throughout the social media space, where you may be promoting something and you want a little bit more amplification. You might tag CCA policy or college completion, and that enables our communications team to be able to further amplify something that you may be working on. I think that's always hard because you've got all these disparate things taking place. Every morning I spend the first couple of hours just going through social media, and I know you're doing great work. And the thing that I always say is, oh, I wish they had told us about this. We could have put them on the stage. We could have, amplified this with a blog post. And so there's a lot of things that can be done to amplify your work. And then the really exciting things that are happening right now are a number of press releases around big projects that we've got going on. I won't go through all of them, but I will say some of the big ones. CCA was chosen last year as one of the Gates Foundation intermediaries for scale organizations of 13 organizations. And the goal over time is to, work with 300, 400 institutions. Of course, our goal is to make sure that our Alliance members are well positioned to be able to receive those resources and support. And so being able to talk with you about how we do that and how we share that within your states as we continue to move through that process is going to be important. We just started doing some work around career alignment and the missing piece of pathways, which is Purpose First, with the state of Kentucky. I think you're going to see a lot of other states, a lot of other funding for those types of projects. Doing a lot of work with minority serving institutions. And so I share that because all of these big projects, in many cases, we'd love to be able to connect with the communications leads in your region or in your state and be able to say, okay, what does this look like? How do we share this information? How do we position your legislators, your institutional leads, your presidents? How do we position them to be a selected state or site for many of these philanthropic opportunities? And this, I think, will lead into and kick us off into our conversation piece with the time that we have remaining, which is how do you advance change through communications and advocacy? I'll say that most of our work over the past few years has kind of fallen in the green category. We've connected, when appropriate. We said, hey, we've got this press release, or you've shared something with us. CCA 2.0, the work that we'll be moving into, I would say, is a more concerted effort to build relationships across the Alliance. How can we fund or find dollars for you to fund projects in your state? How can we bring together affinity groups like Alliance communications leads and have conversations with, the philanthropy communications leads and talk about the big stories that we want to tell? How do we create joint programming, as I mentioned, around things like webinars and blog posts and in-person convenings where you're like, you know what, our state would be really a great site to host something. Those are the things that I think deepen the relationship.
Recently, I'd say over the last year or so, we have realized that a lot of our focus or some piece of our focus is going to be shifting to micro-credentials and short-term credentials that stack into degrees, but nonetheless have some value in and of themselves. I don't really see that represented among CCA's kind of universe of priorities and game changers, but is that something that you all have talked about?
Simple answer is yes. So when we've, I think a lot of people have realized that when we first started, we overwhelmingly worked with community colleges. And, but now it's really all publics and privates within the state. But when we talk about credentials of value, we're talking about certificates, we're talking about associate degrees into transfer into a four-year institution. So we have been talking about stackable credentials. I have on the screen our Vice President for Alliance Engagement and Institutional Transformation, Nia Heidel. Nia, did I miss anything on stackable credentials, or are there any particular projects that we need to let them know about?
So yes, hello everyone. We are focusing more on stackable credentials. Now we have two projects that are happening that on first glance, it will look as though that there would not be space for other institutions. So we have one going on in Kentucky, where we're looking at stackable credentials and how they align academic majors and workforce opportunities. And then we have a pretty large project with a number of predominantly Black and historically Black community colleges to look at the same thing. How do we create pathways around stackable credentials? So the populations that the institutions that are being included in those projects are kind of specific, but what we have embedded in both of those projects is an opportunity to share learnings with other institutions outside of those sectors. So we have some work that we're going to be doing around policy development and how that impacts the incorporation of stackable credentials and affects basic needs and those types of things, as well as strategies that institutions can use to identify like how to create pathways that will work. So all that to say, yes, we're working on it, and we'll have some information to share. I would say they're just kicking off. So I would think probably by the summertime, we would have some things that we could show as learnings, and then opportunities to partner with other institutions and systems to create some of the same things. So it's coming.
Okay, now that's good to hear.
But I was gonna say one thing though, but if you have a specific question or thought or need, if you let me know, then we can figure out what's out there that we might be able to, like in the short order, be able to do to address your need.
Okay, one of the things that recently has come up is in connection with the meta majors. We call them academic focus areas that we created within our system. We kind of branded them. We have iconography associated with these 7 meta major areas, and we were thinking about kind of how do we link the non-credit work to those as well, so that it kind of creates a continuum of learning, kind of visually and thematically in the same way that it would for the degree offerings, to kind of, I know, the sort of on-ramp that has the same road signs, if you will,
yeah,
as our credit meta majors.
I'm right there with you, by the way. I could be saying all those words. We've been referring to them as on-ramps and off-ramps too. So the map is a good analogy, I think. But I would be interested in the same thing. And I think language is important here. I know when we talk about things, we've got different, even within the state of Maine, different higher ed institutions are calling them, badges or micro-credentials or this or that. They refer to, building up of one to the other, and we have the opposite nomenclature. So it's very confusing for so there are some, even regionally, consistency would be helpful. So maybe you and I should go offline, Shannon,
Sure.
talk about that. But it would be great if there was even a sense of where it's heading nationally. That would be, it seems so rudimentary, but it's a starting point. It's an instant stumbling block. Are they badges? Are they micro-credentials? What are you calling them?
I think we're in the same space. I mean, we're using badges, but like you say, we're also using other words, I guess. So yeah.
I think there's an opportunity too, because we've had some meetings, like some regional meetings, and we're always looking for what's the topic that we should discuss in the region. So with the New England region, I could very easily see that this could be the conversation of the meeting we have in the first quarter for 2022, if that's something that, is on everybody's mind up there.
And Shannon and Noah, I think this conversation is an extremely important one, because what we find happening very frequently is events will take place, and then they'll come to a CCA event or have a conversation with their strategy director, with me, and say, why didn't we bring you in on this on the front end? You know, and so when you're thinking about, like, our goal is to make sure that, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So if you're trying to figure out messaging and we're talking to all these other members of the Alliance, we can be like, oh, you know what, don't call it 15 to finish. Call it, you know, finish in 4 or whatever. You know, I think there's so many different larger conversations around communications and language that are critical. You know, I think that just very quickly, I think we've been having a big conversation as everyone is thinking about more equitable outcomes for their students. The reality is that we all live in states, and the CCA Alliance is made up of states that have varying political leanings. And we all want more students to graduate, but how you get that work done and communicated is different in one state versus another. And so being able to highlight, this is how South Carolina was able to move that forward, you know, in messaging it in a very, you know, interesting, contentious, and sometimes challenging political climate. I think those are the types of things where we think we can be of assistance to all of you. And we want your guidance as well. You know, and I would love for people to say, this is what's happening in our state. We're trying to work through it. You know, how do we get this out in the right way? And what are the roadblocks and the barriers that we need to be mindful of?
Simple question, I think, but what's the best way to make CCA and the team aware of, you know, initiatives or projects or things that might be happening in our region or state?
I think the quickest and easiest way is to let your strategy director know. So Jake, you're in GIA, so that would be Brandon. For Shannon and Noel, that's Melanie, and my screen moved. Jeff, where did you say where are you?
Ohio.
That's what I thought, Ohio. And so that would be Melanie as well. And Deanne has Melanie. So most of you all are in Melanie's region. And so I think the quickest way is just to send them a message and let them know, or we can put our emails all in the chat. Melanie's putting everything in the chat. So you can just like let us know like that. Or send Donnie for me a message. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say I was going to say that's a great opportunity of being in a fairly non-hierarchical, you know, non-bureaucratic organization. People pick up the phone all the time and say, Nia, I've got an idea, you know, and literally people are doing the same thing with our president, Yolanda Watson-Spiva. You know, they're sitting back saying, hey, my governor or my SHIO is thinking about this. Can we get you on a panel? You know, who can we involve in something like this? So it could be anyone. I'm very interested in what are the, you know, in this virtual world that we've been in right now. What's the environment like for you? What are some of the challenges that you are managing that was different pre-pandemic in the communication space?
For me, the pandemic and the pandemic news sucked up all the oxygen. So, it was okay because I was right there with it, but the idea of everything had to be kind of coming back to it or in the context of it. So even though there might have been projects that were on track before or during, they weren't worthy of really talking about. But if there was no pandemic, of course, it would have been something we would have talked about. So from a communication standpoint, that was a big part of it. And just the sheer disruption of it, of course. I work at the system level, so I work with the counterparts at the colleges. And so keeping us all, you know, we were all focused on the same thing, but in our own little bubbles. So staying connected was tough.
Totally agree with that. And I think also something that I'm really uncertain of looking into the future is what convenings are going to be like, or whether they'll still happen. I was supposed to be at a conference earlier this week, and at the last minute I had to pivot to doing it virtually. And so you had half the group there, you had half the group joining online. I know part of the power of CCA is bringing people actually together, physically together, to kind of help reinvigorate or spread ideas and have these conversations. What's that going to look like for you all in this maybe new era of hybrid convenings, if that's not even a term, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, the good news is we've learned a lot, you know, and so what we figured out is that people are pining to get back together in person. And we also realize that There are a lot of things that we did in person that probably could have been done virtual. So I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities for hybrid models. I think that what we're seeing, just the trends across conferences, is that it'll be a while before they ramp back up. You know, people, you know, have personal health concerns. And so, you know, how quickly they'll be willing to jump back on a plane, I think it'll take a while for all of them to start moving. We would love to be able to help design and co-create those opportunities with you and be able to figure out what might be the best ways to make that happen, or to make any of those smaller mini convenings or larger size convenings take place.
Yeah, I mean, maybe regionally is, you know, is the best approach right now, or at least a good approach, instead of these large national convenings. You know, maybe you do things with a smaller group of states that are all geographically proximate, so it's not a huge heavy lift to get there. Not as much of a kind of a travel event or a multi-hundred person gathering, but you know, maybe it's a group of a couple of dozen people still coming together.
Absolutely, and we're starting to do that. We've just been on the road to Alabama doing something smaller. Same thing, we've got something scheduled in the New England states in early December. So love to have that conversation. What is it that you need from us, or could be of value that we could be where we can be of value to you? I know that's a broad question right now, but is there anything in your head of things that you're thinking based on some of the things I might have shown you, or things that you're just planning for 2022 or even late 2021, where we should be aware of or should be engaged or consider to be engaged?
I'm not sure if this is the right fit, but given what we're seeing with enrollment trends and everything that we offer to make it as easy and low barrier, and you know, tons of communicating about what we have to offer, reaching people and sort of coming up against this great apathy or resignation that we're seeing, I do feel like there's a bit of shouting into the wind right now, and effective ways to get our messages out, and not just the standard, but like in this environment. Tools that have worked in the past don't seem to be working, or we need new ones to adjust. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and I'd love the groups, you know, if there's strategies out there, if there's research out there, if there's, like I said, new tools to be thinking about. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of shifting landscape in social media and what's effective and what isn't. It's smoke in a way, right? It's as soon as you think you've got it, the world moves on. But I don't know if the others have struggled with that, but that's something that I'm really trying to stay on top of.
What I'm seeing is that the environment we're trying to operate in is affected by many things that aren't really in our control. And so it's kind of figuring out where we can. So for instance, I assume Maine is like New Hampshire. There's an unbelievably urgent and acute labor shortage, right? People are simply not working. And some of that is a shifting kind of ability to be choosy. Some of it is childcare. We're seeing the groups that aren't coming back into the labor force as 20 to 29-year-olds, 55 to 64-year-olds, and women of all ages. You know, what do we do with that? We can't change the fact that there's not a lot of childcare. We can't change the fact that companies are offering major bonuses for people to come to work. What we're trying to think of is not setting ourselves up as an alternative. It's either you work or you're in school. How can we mesh those two worlds for people? And we've always done that to some extent, but now I think it has to be explicit. Yes, you can mesh, you can work, and you can make progress in your education at the same time.
Yeah, we've been emphasizing our earn and learn, right? You know, you either, sometimes we have stipends for the free short-term workforce training, things where there's the incentive is there. But it can't just be throwing money at it too. And it, as you say, it's more than a money question. I think a lot of people are making decisions based on other things that, as you say, are out of our control.
You may have heard, I mean, that's a very real problem that we're seeing all over. And you may have heard that maybe about a month ago, that we announced a partnership with Acadium, which is an online course sharing company platform that will allow members, our Alliance members, to participate in. It's a really amazing type of option, because the students remain your students, but it opens up so many course options for them because we're part of a consortia, and your students are able to apply their financial aid and take classes from all over the country. So we can send, Melanie just put it in the chat, but that might be an option for you too, because since the classes are literally from all over the country at all times, individuals who have issues with childcare are able to take classes asynchronously and at all these different times that will allow them to continue, like to persist.
Absolutely. And there are a number of things that are forthcoming from CCA that you should probably be aware of. You know, I think one of the things states are trying to figure out is when they're doing virtual or in-person events, like what's the new content? So Nia just shared one, a lot of work on adult learners and what's taking place and what's working. I think that CCA's work broadly has always been around telling you and sharing the broad idea, but also getting into the weeds of how do you do it. So there'll be a new equity publication that will focus less on you should do this, you know, for the value of doing it, into what does that look like across strategies, which I think a number of practitioners are really longing to get that level of information. There'll be a lot of information coming out around workforce alignment and how does pathways ensure that it's aligned with major decisions and economic outcomes. And so even as we come to a close, there are a couple things I want to share with you quickly. A big one for us is that, you know, this work is needed now more than ever before. And so, you know, for CCA, it's never been about how do we get out of the pandemic or how do we deal with this short-term problem. It's more about where will the ball be? And so we are thinking and growing and identifying and hiring new individuals around, you know, we're looking for a director of communications, but a number of other positions that are listed here that we're really excited about. Also want to share that, you know, this week there are some of these conversations that are taking place. So even just in the next, you know, 15 minutes or so, we'll have a session that's open around equity impacts on COVID and the pandemic. But tomorrow there'll be some conversations for policy leads around outcomes-based funding. And then there's a session on Thursday around how do you use these HERF dollars, this influx of dollars, how do you use them to advance your student success efforts? So we're excited about all the things that are taking place. We will continue to talk to you about the idea of a larger communications leads convening, should you find that to be something of interest. I mean, I just think it would be powerful to get, you know, all 48, you know, communications leads across the Alliance together and talk about what's the big, bold messages that we're going to share, what are our learnings, and how do we use it to influence policy and state practice. I think that's something that we've never done before, and would love to get your insights on that. And so if you're interested in working on that with us, or saying we definitely want to raise our hand and be a part, please, we'll make sure that we send you some updates on that. With that being said, we're at time. I just want to say thank you for everything you continue to do. We're happy to have you as partners. We will share this conversation that's being taped with other Alliance members and with other communications leads. But if you need us, don't wait. Let us know. We'd love to get on the calendar. We'd love to be able to assist. We'd love to help you plan and coordinate and think about the future of our country through higher education. So thank you very much. We appreciate you. If you need us, let us know.